The European Union and Iran have agreed to maintain trade ties. That's ahead of US sanctions against Tehran that take effect in November. The EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, says it's part of an effort to keep the Iran nuclear deal alive after the US abandoned it in May. The EU plans to set up a new payments channel with Iran. This would let European companies do business with Iran legally and free from exposure to US sanctions. Other parties to the Iran deal, namely China and Russia, will also be allowed to use the facility. Mogherini says technical experts will be meeting to flesh out the details, but European diplomats say it'll be similar to a barter system used by the Soviets during the Cold War. It'll make way for the exchange of Iranian oil for European goods without money changing hands. Now, several multinationals, including Total and General Electric, have already pulled out of Iran. The EU hopes these measures will help companies that continue to do business there.
This will mean that EU member states will set up a legal entity to facilitate legitimate financial transactions with Iran, and this will allow European companies to continue to trade with Iran in accordance with European Union law and could be open to other partners in the world.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump used his address to the UN General Assembly to defend his decision to reimpose sanctions on Iran.
The United States has launched a campaign of economic pressure to deny the regime the funds it needs to advance its bloody agenda. Last month, we began reimposing hard-hitting nuclear sanctions that have been lifted under the Iran deal. Additional sanctions will resume November 5th, and more will follow. And we are working with countries that import Iranian crude oil to cut their purchases substantially.
Joining me for more is Craig Copetas, our editor-at-large, who's in Paris. Hello there, Craig. So after listening to Donald Trump there, how willing do you think the EU is going to be to establish this back-channel payment system, especially after Trump described Iran as a country that sows chaos, death and destruction?
There are few guarantees in life, but having lived and covered and covered the Soviet Union for some 8 years during the Cold War days, I can tell you, you don't want to go back to a Soviet-style barter system. It doesn't work. And what the EU is saying points to a specific line that Trump gave in his speech. He said America is not going to relinquish control to an unelected bureaucracy. That was aimed directly at the EU. The EU can establish whatever back channel it wants to, but the United States can still go after the companies that put their funds in and out of that back channel to do deals with Iran. It's as simple as that. The U.S. has done it in the past. Trump's speech certainly more than indicates he'll do it in the future. Prior to his speech, he said that he would hit Iran with a massive level of sanctions after this next round coming up in November.
Yeah, that level of opprobrium from Trump sounding very much like the UK's Brexit Leave campaigners. Now, what could Trump do you think, to shut down this EU-Iran payment system?
Any company that puts or bank that puts money through the system does not get to do any business in the United States and is indicted and prosecuted under our old friend, the extraterritorial application of U.S. law and the weaponization of the U.S. dollar. It's, that's what he's going to do. And, listen, let's get Trump's position here very clear. You use the word opprobrium. Yeah. But here's what Trump is saying. Trump is saying, look, who do you want to do business with? These, as he describes them, these corrupt mullahs in Iran who sow chaos, death, and destruction? Or do you want to do business with the United States? Do you trust the mullatory in Iran to actually not be building nuclear weapons? America is saying, We don't trust them. Why should you?
Yeah, indeed, except that the US was party to that deal that brought Iran out of the cold a few years ago.
Well,
But
that's a distinction in Trump's mind's eye. That's a distinction without a difference. That was another administration. Trump's people believe it, saying it's not like that anymore. Our foreign policy has changed. And John Kerry, former Secretary of State, who helped broker that deal, stopped talking about it because you're not Secretary of State anymore. This is hard line. This is a man who stood up in front of the United Nations and said that Iran finances terrorism and funds havoc and slaughter all throughout the world, and adding that all nations should isolate Iran's regime. That's very tough talk.
yeah. Finally, Craig, do you think that companies like Total, which have already scaled back their presence in Iran, are going to be tempted to come back into Iran by this new system?
I don't think they will. I think, look, it's very clear Iran's GDP is minuscule in comparison to the United States. Companies want to do business with the U.S. They don't really want to do business with Iran. It's too complex. The EU is creating this, that what Trump calls an unelected bureaucracy, is doing this for political reasons, and that's it.
Indeed. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Craig Copetas in Paris. Thank you.